Alright guys, I did my little project on glyphosate. I don't know if you guys know this chemical that's being readily sprayed basically everywhere in the country. You know, it's Roundup. It's a weed control. If you want to go to the next slide. Got a little timeline here. It was basically created in the 1950s, from a pharmaceutical company, Clay. 10 years later, it was passed down to another company, and 10 years after that, Monsanto's chemists noticed the potential of this herbicide and called it the name that we all know today as Roundup. Around 1974, glyphosate was first marketed to the farmers to use. And then around the 90s, this chemical, they allowed farmers to grow varieties of cotton, soybeans, and corn for the herbicide-tolerant, genetically engineered, and Roundup ready. By 2000, Monsanto's patent had ended, and this chemical grew from 1 farm to 30 farms. So the production massively tripled within 2000. So why do we use this chemical? We use it on these crops, to get rid of the weeds, obviously around the house, to also get rid of the weeds on roadsides, and they even spray it directly into our waterways. Go ahead and net. This is just the chemical structure of it. It's a phosphonic acid resulting from the formal oxidative coupling of the methyl group of methylphosphonic acid with amino group of glycine. Just to show for us chemists. Environmental exposure and contamination, once it gets into our water and in our ecosystems, glyphosate breaks down into aminomethylphosphonic acid, AMPA, in the soil and water. This chemical, AMPA, eventually gets into our groundwater and makes its way into our creeks, rivers, and bays. Recent studies have been made to illustrate the higher than expected levels of glyphosate in the water we drink today and the food we eat. Presence in the air can be described to the way they spray around the farms, and it gets soaked up with the rain and then comes back down onto us. Go ahead and end. It's just a little illustration I put up there, a funny little comic I found online. So glyphosate exposure to the humans and animals around here, there's acute toxicity, which is not as bad if you inhale it or get it on your skin or get some in your mouth, you're spraying it. There's a chronic toxicity, which is, if you digest small bits of it over time and accumulate it into your body with eating certain kind of foods that, have it in it. And the highest risk of exposure would be the glyphosate chemical factories, the workers on these farms, rural areas, and people anywhere around these watersheds, really. Go ahead and net. This is just a little chart I found, basically showing the big explosion of it after, it was allowed to be used so readily by the farmers, by the papers that people are doing these days, that you can go and look up and do your own research on this chemical nowadays. And obviously there's a concern for it. Go ahead, Matt. So it is in our soils. Obviously, they spray it directly into the ground before they even plant these seeds that are genetically modified. So it's directly applied to the ground after planting genetically modified. It's resistant to chemicals in agriculture. This method allows the chemicals to kill off the weeds that might affect the plant growth of the desired crop, such as corn, soybean, sorghum, whatever. Its half-life in the soils is usually described to 2 to 200 days, depending on the soil type, and weather pertaining could present much, much longer. Go ahead, Ned. Here's a little pictogram I picked out that really breaks it down to just showing, a tractor spraying the chemical, getting it, on the crops. These are probably supposed to be weeds and killing all those, and then eventually it reaches down and then gets into the waterways. The fish accumulate it, it goes up into the wind deposits, rain comes back down on the humans, people eat the fish. There's a whole cycle of life that goes around this chemical. Go ahead, Nick. So glyphosate in water. Monsanto's claimed glyphosate wouldn't be a problem to surface and groundwater due to its high absorbance to clay and organic matter. But parts of the glyphosate and its metabolites, AMPA, end up in dissolved phase in the groundwater after heavy rains. Glyphosate readily converts into this primary metabolite, AMPA, that holds most of the precursors' harmful properties and becomes far more persistent, such that its half-life lasts between 76 to 240 days. Erosion from the rain can also transport soil particles with glyphosate and AMPA into surface water, where it can remain in the particulate phase or be dissolved. It is directly applied to certain waterways that kill back these invasive aquatic plants that they say. Go ahead. Here's just a little example of all the foods that it's basically present in. And since that termination of that patent, genetically modified glyphosate tolerant crops varieties, farmers have been increasing their usage of glyphosate, the Roundup, every year. The more this chemical gets sprayed on the crops, more and more the humans and other animals will consume them and get them into their system. Here's another really cool little illustration I found online that really shows that breakdown. And then the AMPA, once that water hits it, it turns into it breaks that chemical bond and makes it much more dangerous. And eventually it goes in soil, water, us. Go ahead, Ned. So, some goals and actions that we can take. The Department of Economic Social Affairs has designed a Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, which are 17 goals that help map a path of sustainability that can improve life for all beings. Through these SDGs, number 2 is a zero hunger, but we need to keep in mind, what we are feeding to people, So SDG 12 focuses on responsible production and consumption of food. When farmers spray these chemicals and use genetically modified plants to feed the world, will this be sustainable, or should we practice actual sustainable practices like no-till crop rotation, cover cropping, crop diversity, and just letting the fields rest and regain that organic material back into the field? And then when you look at these other SDGs, they discuss how having healthy soils by enhancing the soil health and restoring the land will produce healthy food and richer nutrition for all. Go ahead. And this is just a diagram of all those sustainable practices and ways of looking at it, and if we all just practice a little bit more sustainability, I think we can eventually get to a better goal, and use less chemicals and preservatives in our foods, I think. And that's I think that's the last one, is it? And that's it's just a reference I used. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Gauge a little bit on this chemical.